Good evening everybody and welcome to the GT World Challenge Esports Europe Sprint Series, third round of the season from the beautiful Hungaroring. 4.381 kilometres and 13 corners are available for our drivers to go racing on today for a 16-minute encounter in one of the best esport racing series in the entire world. Talking you through all the drama today will be myself, Paul Jeffrey, and once again I am delighted to welcome Mr. Ben Constanduras alongside me in the commentary booth.
Paul, it's great to be here. Love the Hungaroring as a place to visit in the real world, and it's a real challenge for the drivers. Cannot wait to see how our esports racers deal with a track that is not particularly easy to overtake, but plenty of places to make errors.
Yeah, it's a fabulous track. Would totally agree with you on that one, Ben. And although it is quite difficult to overtake, it's perhaps why we don't see this circuit very much in circulation in many other championships. So it's quite nice to have a little bit of change and a little bit of variety, isn't it, into what is the third of 10 races this season, and somewhat different to Paul Ricard last time out on June the 11th.
Yeah, absolutely. Assetto Corsa Competizione growing every year, basically, as the World Challenge takes to new circuits. They have to bring those new circuits to the platform, and Hungaroring, I don't believe actually on the calendar for this year, but really cool place where they visited in the past. And I tell you, it's only a stone's throw from the city of Budapest itself, which is an amazing place to visit. So whenever you go there, you know you're going to have a great time, regardless of what happens on track.
Which is absolutely nothing to do with the fact that it's less than €1 for a pint of lager in any given bar. So in the real world, it's a great place, and in the virtual world as well, it's an absolutely fabulous track in which to race. And this is going to be a critical round because, as we see the standings on our screen at the moment, we've got joint championship leaders. Yes, David Tinitzer and Josh Rogers for the FDA Esports team and VRS Coanda SimSport respectively are level on 43 points after a victory and a second position apiece from the opening two races. Nils Naujoks in the big BMW doing great work so far this season to hold third in the championship standings ahead of former world's fastest gamer James Baldwin for the McLaren Shadow team. Gianni Di Salvo, another Ferrari Driver Academy Esports team driver, is fifth in the standings on 16 points ahead of R8G Esports Roman Grosjean's esports team Tobias Pfeffer in P6, with Kevin Sigge, new to the world of Assetto Corsa Competizione, currently holds 7th on 12 points in the championship standings in his McLaren 720S GT3. And remember, folks at home, the drivers who finish in the top 5 in this race are automatically invited to the next one, but if you finish outside the top 5, regardless, Ben, of where you are in the championship standings, you've got to qualify for the next one all over again, so anything could happen, couldn't it?
What it does give you, though, is the opportunity to change your car, because if you're locked into the top 5, you have to stick with the car that you have won in, and actually that top 5 that you can see in front of you have those cars associated to them as part of their team. But if you do have that flexibility, you can choose different cars, and we have seen that between rounds 1 and rounds 2, and I think we'll see some more variance in the choice of car as we go across different tracks that favour different vehicles.
That's actually a really good point indeed, because they say it's a 10-race championship, so we're visiting a wide array of very different circuits. For example, we started the season at Monza, which is the temple of speed, incredibly fast, but then staying in Italy for round 7 on September the 10th, we're going to Misano, which is one of the smallest, slowest, most technical laps on the entire calendar. So what works in Monza may not necessarily work at different tracks, and that's another element of strategy, another element of throwing something different into the mix, isn't it, that the drivers have got to think about and contend with as they're vying for what is going to be an incredibly important championship victory for them, hopefully, at the end of the season, isn't it?
A good opportunity there just in front of you to see some of the faces that are taking part and their different rigs as well. Look at the posture of Darren King, for instance, there. Very unusual way to drive a car. You would never sit like that if you're in a, well, maybe in a touring car, but he's very high in comparison to, for instance, we've got just alongside him on the left-hand side, somebody using VR goggles. So everyone using different kit that they know very well, that they would have practiced with. So in a way they're comfortable with it, but it does offer opportunities for some and not others.
Yeah, it does indeed, and that's what's the beautiful thing about virtual motorsport. This is obviously esports sim racing, and I'll come back to that one actually, because we're going to look at the entry list now, and you can see a few returning names. So Gianni Di Salvo, that we spoke about earlier, 5th in the championship standings, returns for the Ferrari Driver Academy eSport team. Kevin Siggy once again for Team Redline in the McLaren 720. Yes, we've got Manuel Rodriguez, another Team Redline driver, but curiously using a different car, the Audi R8 LMS GT3 Evo. Jeremy Butlew for VRS Co-Anda Sim Sports in one of the incredibly fast Bentley Continental GT3s. Jeremy will be a driver to keep our eye out for over the course of this next race. Igor Sirocco, a private entry in a Lexus RCF as well. Great to see Lexus represented on the grid, and Alessio Catania as well for Team Ballas Esport, also sporting the Japanese brand. James Baldwin, McLaren Shadow driver in the 720 GT3. Tariq Gamel, Williams Esports. He's using the Audi R8 LMS GT3 Evo. Not seen much of Tariq Gamel at the sharp end of the grid, so it'll be great to see how he gets on today. Nils Naujoks, BMW Motorsport Sim Racing G2 Esports in the big BMW M6 GT3, 3rd in the championship standings, expecting big things today from Nils as the race progresses. Tommy Osgaard as well for VRS Co-Anda. Attila Denks, another BMW driver, so a popular car is the BMW, and Evan Marion for Burst Esports in the Honda NSX GT3, another great car to see out on the grid, and great to see actually that level of variety that GT3 racing offers on this platform. Arthur Camara, another BMW driver, one to watch. Nikodem Wisniewski, another one of the Williams Esports guys, alongside Tobias Pfeffer for the R8 G Esport team, another one of the inevitably very, very quick McLarens. And so far, Ben, in the championship standings, we've got a McLaren in 4th, 6th, 7th, 8th and 9th. So it seems to be a competitive car across the board, and it's going to be very interesting, isn't it, to see which car is the one to have over the course of this race. So, talking of the course of this race, qualification has happened while we've been on air. It's a 15-minute qualification session. We go into a 60-minute race. During the course of the race, there is a mandatory pit window. Now, anybody that's new to SRO Esport competition, what a mandatory pit window means is basically for 10 minutes during the course of the race, the pit lane will be open and drivers will have to come down pit road. They will have to apply at least 1 litre of fuel in their car. They don't have to change tyres, but they can do if they so wish. And once they've served that mandatory stop, they're free to complete the rest of the race. I'll talk to you a little bit later on in the broadcast on how you can identify who's been down pit road. But Ben, we've seen many times before, haven't we, that bit of strategy, that little bit of an element of change in the race can really mix things up for the drivers, can't it?
I think here especially, if overtaking is tricky, then getting yourself out of traffic is going to be incredibly key around this circuit, and therefore choosing the time to pit, whether it be to take you out of traffic or perhaps put you in traffic, will be a very, very important strategic decision that maybe the drivers will not be taking, but the teams who are supporting the drivers will certainly be watching very keenly.
Yeah, we've seen that before in many of the different SRO eSport competitions. Of course, we run the Asia season, the America season, the European sprint and endurance, as well as the British season in weeks and months gone past. And we've seen that the overcut or the undercut can be a very powerful thing. But looking at the grid now, so Kevin Siggy for Redline on pole position ahead of joint championship leader David Tanitsa in the number 95 Ferrari. Josh Rogers lines up at the front of the second row of the grid in the VRS Co-Anda SimSport Porsche alongside Gianni Di Salvo for FDA Esports team. On P5 is Birioni in the Bentley Continental, the first of the Bentley Continentals, alongside the sister car of Nikodem Wisniewski in 6th position, with Jeremy Butlew in the number 191 machine, lining up 7th on the grid, ahead of 8th position Kevin Ciclare. So 4 Bentleys lining up alongside each other. It'll be fascinating to see how they get through the running order, and they're ahead of 9th place Tobias Pfeffer in the McLaren 720S GT3. Dominic Blyer rounds out the top 10 positions ahead of the first of the Aston Martins, which is Moreno Sorica in 11th position. He's ahead of Sam Bagnall in the Porsche 911 GT3. In 13th place is Nils Naujoks. Watch out for Naujoks working his way through the order. Just ahead of Leonardo Dalcamo in 14th. James Baldwin, a very disappointed P15 on the grid, ahead of Jonas Savalainen P16. Masoud is in 17th in the 911 number 33. Petrichenko P18 in the number 26. Arthur Camara, a very disappointing 19th position on the grid. Nat Gatz in 20th place, rounding up the top 20. 21st is Lee in the Ferrari 488 number 74. Whitehead in 22nd, ahead of Ezekiel in 23rd. Romanenko, another driver would have expected to do more in the number 48, lines up 24th. Alexander Hibinu in P25. Brzezinski in the Aston Martin number 3 in 26. Luca Lazio 27th. A very, very disappointed Gregor Schill in the BMW is 28th. 29th Stefenko Osgaard. Disappointing for VRS in P30. There you can see him in the number 58 Aston Martin. Attila Denks in 31st, ahead of Padrana P32. Darren King lines up 33rd on the grid. Giantara in the number 9 Lamborghini Huracan GT3 is 34th. Pechman 35. Rodriguez Rincon in the number 14 Audi R8 LMS Evo is 36 on the grid. 37 is Catano. Tariq Gamel for Williams in the Audi R8 LMS Evo that you can see there, the number 27 is 38th on the grid. Then we get down to Nicholas Hildebrand in the Honda NSX GT3 and to Marche and Ciruro in the Lexus Duo at the back of the grid. And the final row is Marion in a Honda NSX GT3 and Pedrozzini in a BMW M6 GT3 number 20. And that is a very large grid for a relatively small circuit, Ben, which I reckon means we're going to have some traffic and a little bit of excitement working your way through.
Genuinely don't know how they're going to fit around the circuit. So many cars. And once we get a bit of field spread, it won't be long before the fastest guys will catch the guys at the back. I think we'll see a bit of lappery, and that could also play an interesting part in our race here at Hungary. Just a couple of names to pick out there. 2 new names that really stood out for me. Brendan Lee, Formula One Esports champion for Mercedes, now switched to Ferrari FDA, and he's making his first start on Assetto Corsa Competizione, having really just dedicated his life to F1 Esports. And also Nico Wisniewski, who is most famous, I suppose, for winning the Le Mans 24-hour virtual for Williams. And he's a bit of a multi-platform specialist, but we don't see him very often on Assetto Corsa Competizione.
No, that's very true. They're 2 very big names. Anybody who follows the world of virtual motorsport will no doubt be very, very familiar with both of those names. Brendan Lee actually made his Assetto Corsa Competizione debut in the Endurance Series for the FDA eSport team as one of a 3-driver strength alongside David Tinitza and Gianni De Salvo. So he's got a little bit of experience in this car, but this is the very first outing in the shorter 60-minute sprint race. We're looking at his teammate there, David Tinitza. He'll be hoping for a strong race result, and it's a good opportunity this, Ben, for Tinitza, isn't it? He's got his teammate behind him in P4, and he's just ahead of his main championship rival Josh Rogers, who is the front of the second row of the grid. So big opportunity here, isn't it, for David Tinitza? As we see the cars now rounding the first corner. This is a formation lap. As always in this kind of competition, there will be a rolling start. The cars will line up 2 by 2 as they approach the end of the lap, and this is very much a danger zone time for the drivers. They're warming the car up, they're warming the tyres up, they're warming themselves up, and for a track like this, in a competition where the level is so high amongst the drivers, you've really got to make the most of the opening laps, the opening corners, to try and find a way past your rivals, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. That's when everything kind of gets messed up because you're so close. You can be messed up by the guy in front, just like decided to take a slightly different line. Concertina effects. Once the field starts to spread out, much harder to make passing manoeuvres. What is very curious is to see how the different cars react to different stages in the race, of course. A 1 hour race around Hungary is going to be very hungry on the Pirelli tyres that they use. So they're going to have to be considerate of that, I would have thought, because we've got a lot of medium speed turns here. Not big braking zones necessarily, but certainly looking after the tyres to make them last the full 1 hour is going to be a consideration for the majority of our cars, I reckon.
Yep, that is a very, very good point. Of course, the drivers, if they so wish, can jump down pit road and change their tyres. It's ill-advised to do so because of the time loss you'll have while stationary in pit lane. So we do expect the entirety of this 43-car grid to go all the way through to the checkered flag on the same set of tyres. The car that we're looking at this moment in time, Tiziano Birone, that's a Bentley Continental GT3 that has proven to be very good on the curbs, very good on its tyres. And there are 4 of them snapping at the heels of the top 4, so expect to see at least one of those cars start making their way forward. And if you're Josh Rogers, Ben, as we're about to line up, actually we're going now into the final sector, if you're Josh Rogers, are you going to give everything to try and find a way past your championship rivals up the field in this first corner?
In Josh, no. Maybe other drivers would, but Josh is such a level-headed guy. He will be thinking championship all the way, and therefore no risks. I am sure of that. Especially as he's still relatively new to the platform, and amazing considering his successes so far. But great to see Kevin Siggy on the pole in the McLaren as well, 4 red line, and let's see what happens going into that first corner. It's a tight one.
Right then, here we go. The GT World Challenge Esports Europe Sprint Series, the 3rd round from the Hungaroring is about to go green. Kevin Siggy, picture in picture, on pole position, will be looking to retain the inside line. He's jumped immediately off the line by David Tanitzka, who goes defensive, covers the inside line. There's a VRS Commander Porsche in the mix as well, flashing the lights, trying to unnerve his rival. Siggy looks to the outside line. Can he go the long way around the first corner? No, he cannot. He gives up position. So David Tanitzka is our new race leader as contact. Further down the field, that's a Porsche facing the wrong direction. 1 and 2 cars have to go onto the grass and avoid action. No such problem at the front of the field. David Tanitzka, our early race leader. Kevin Siggy drops down into 2nd position. Josh Rogers now going all the way from Josh Rogers, dropping down into 5th. That is Gianni Di Salvo going the long way round the 3rd corner. We see one of the Bentley Continentals already making a jump up in the 3rd position. So drama at the front of the field, drama further down as well. We're looking at Kevin Siclari now, 10th position in the 191. He's got a McLaren and an Aston Martin for company as all the cars check up for braking into the chicane. This bed is the danger zone, and Siclari immediately makes a mistake, makes a little bit of contact with the barriers, gets the car back on the up and running. But this is exactly what we worried about at the start of the show. The concertina effect, and Kevin Siclari is the one that loses out in the opening few corners.
That was going past him. Josh Rogers there in 5th position. Not a good start at all. Into the first turn, got a bit of a swapper on the exit, wheel spin, and that allowed 2 cars to come past. Brioni in 3rd. De Salvo eventually got the move done into turn 5 up to 4th, but now Rogers on the tail and trying to exploit that benefit of the Porsche around this circuit, the rotation, the unique balance that the Porsche has over every other car.
Right, this is a critical time for the Ferrari Driver Academy esports team. Gianni Di Salvo, of course, is racing for himself as well as the team, but he's got a job to do now. He needs to keep Josh Rogers at bay for as long as he possibly can. Remember, Rogers and our race leader, David Tanitzka, are championship rivals, joint top of the points. And they, after the first 2 races of the season, so the longer Di Salvo can keep Rogers at bay, the harder Di Salvo will make Rogers work his tyres, which means he'll lose pace towards the end of the stint. The more opportunity David Tanitzka has to pull out a gap at the front of the field. So big pressure on Gianni Di Salvo. Josh Rogers doing everything he can. And another driver that's had a great start to this race is this man here, James Baldwin. Baldwin 15th on the grid, 5 places to the good already, and now chasing down Tobias Pfeffer ahead. James Baldwin, a man on the move, but he's got to be careful because Moreno Sarica in the Williams Esport Aston Martin is also nibbling at the heels of that McLaren. So this is 3 cars fighting for one top 10 position.
These are guys that perhaps didn't quite exploit the qualifying as much as they would have liked. James Baldwin, certainly after his results just off the podium in Monza and on the podium in Paul Ricard, would be expecting to be up there again here, especially as we've got Kevin Siggy up there in second position. But the McLaren Shadow car, obviously not with the better setup, and of course they are setting all these cars up for qualifying and the 60-minute race. They'll have setups different for the 2 different phases of the weekend, of the evening's action. A qualifying setup very different to a full 60-minute race setup, and Baldwin missing out on a decent qualifying position. Work to do then, up to 10th though already.
Yep, and look here, Ben, we've got Gianni De Salvo. We're riding from the rear camera of the FDA Esports Team Ferrari. De Salvo, Josh Rogers just looking to the inside, trying to find a way past. But curiously, most interestingly of all, look behind the VRS Coanda Porsche, and there is Nikodem Wisniewski in the 333 Bentley Continental GT3. One of the names that you picked out at the start of the show as a big name driver, new to the series, and immediately Wisniewski using all that racecraft, all that experience to get just the start he needs and become the first of the gaggle of Bentleys that we need to try and find a way past these 2 championship protagonists. So De Salvo working hard at the steering wheel, trying to keep that Porsche at bay, but Josh Rogers needs to keep half an eye on his mirrors because there's a big old Bentley that's very keen to find a way past the championship leader. Danger times for Josh Rogers, but I dare say, Ben, I'm going to venture that maybe that Porsche looks a little bit more lively and a little bit more on its toes than the Ferrari ahead of it at this early stage in the race.
And isn't that what we see a lot with the Ferraris, that they are set up for a long game and they don't get particularly fast over one lap? It's all about the 60 minutes.
Yeah, the Ferrari team, of course, got a team of engineers back at Maranello that are very much keen on making sure they get the maximum performance out of the car possible. It's not just for now, it's not just for qualifying, it's not just for the opening lap of the race, it's for the entirety of the 60-minute sprint. And we've seen this in SRO competition before, that you can set a car up to be fast at different stages in the race. And often, as we're seeing now, Masoud trying to find a way past in 18th position. So this is Remni Masoud in 18th place, looking at Brzezinski ahead in the Williams Esport Aston Martin. The Porsche driver having ample more speed than the Aston Martin, now coming down into T1. Can Masoud find a way past? The Aston goes to the inside.
There's not really the big braking zones that he's looking for. Maybe going into turn 3 as they're approaching there, but you can brake quite deep into that corner as well if you're the Ferrari and allow yourself to run wide, open the door for it then goes right here, and therefore you benefit again. So really the last corner and the first corner are the overtaking opportunities that he'll be looking forward to, or of course the opportunity of the pit stop.
Indeed. Now, ladies and gents at home, we spoke at the start of the show about the mandatory pit stop, and I was going to explain to you how you'll be able to see who's been down pit road and who hasn't. On the timing stack, on the left-hand side of your screen, you see a little orange box next to the drivers' names with a number 1 in it. When our pit window opens, which is traditionally at the 35 minutes to go mark in the race after 25 minutes of racing, when the drivers have been down pit road, that'll go green, the number 1 will disappear, and that is how you know they've made their stop. Now, we've got a little bit of time left until we need to worry about that one. Let's just have a quick recap of where everybody is out on track. David Tonitza, still our race leader, 0.5 of a second to the good from Birone in the first of the Bentley Continentals. This is the fight of the race so far. In 4th place, Gianni Di Salvo in the Ferrari, closely followed by the VRS Porsche of this man, Josh Rogers, that we saw momentarily on the screen, and Nikita Wisniewski keeping a watching brief in the Bentley behind. Wisniewski, very experienced driver, he'll not venture into this fight unless he can be confident of finding a way past. As we see now, Rogers goes defensive into T1. Wisniewski gets a good run in the Bentley Continental, try and cut back to the inside. Rogers has the line covered, and Wisniewski with nowhere to go. Great bit of defensive driving there from Josh Rogers.
Yeah, held the apex on the exit there, didn't get on the power as early as he could have done, and that prevented Wisniewski from doing the switchback, cutting from the outside to the inside and getting more momentum into the next corner. So very wise driving, but Josh Rogers is actually driving to his mirrors right now, and we've not seen that very often.
No, we don't. This will be very interesting, actually. Josh Rogers, one of those drivers that you can pretty much rely on being at the very front of the field. So great to see him in a defensive position now. Another tool in his armoury we get to assess. But Kevin Sigge, also a man on the defensive in the red line car, the red line McLaren, our previous pole sitter, lost the lead to David Tonitza in an epic battle down into T1. And now Kevin Sigge under significant pressure from the Bentley behind. So the red line car doesn't quite have the pace of his rivals at this moment in time. And Sigge, we've seen this before, haven't we, Ben, in SRO competition? Great defender, does not make mistakes, but works the tyres hard when he's in this position. And this could make Kevin Sigge vulnerable as the race progresses.
It was a weird one, wasn't it? His start, he was hanging back, I think, to try and affect a penalty on Tonitza, because he was the pole man, and in theory he should go over the start-finishing line first. But there's a quirk in Assetto Corsa Competizione where the leader can actually cross the line cross the line second and still start the race. But if Sigge had held back more, Tonitza would have got a jump start penalty. And I feel as though Sigge was trying to do that, but it didn't happen, and therefore he lost that lead instantly, nearly losing second position to Josh Rogers on the run down to turn 1, but ultimately Rogers making the error and keeps Kevin Sigge holding on. It's close though, 6/10 of a second between Tonitza, that's nothing really, with Brioni looking faster of course, but look, they're locked together, they're really, really close.
Yeah, it's fantastic. We've got 2 pockets of really good racing at the front of the field. We've got Tonitza, Sigge and Birone, 1, 2, 3. We've got this race, which is De Salvo, Rogers and Wisniewski, 4, 5 and 6. A little bit further down the running order, James Baldwin, who we've spoken about before, very much in touch in P10. James Baldwin in the last of the points-paying positions at the moment in time. Pfeffer just ahead. This man, Jeremy Boulou, up in 8th position, and another one of the VRS cars in the Bentley Continental on this occasion. So Jeremy Boulou is doing everything he can to find a way past the Lamborghini of Dominic Blyer ahead. Blyer, of course, is another one of those drivers that we've seen plenty of in different competitions. He's currently 14th in the championship standings with just a singular point from the last race that we had at Paul Ricard. The Lamborghini, not necessarily one of the most competitive prospects in the field, but it looks and sounds tremendous as once again we go back to Josh Rogers, trying everything, go wide to come out tight to get the run down on the start finish straight. And Rogers got to be careful, hasn't he, Ben? Because the harder he works the car, the harder he works the tyres, potentially the more lap time he's going to give up as the stint progresses.
He's in that worst position, isn't he, where he's having to attack and defend at the same time. So if he attacks and doesn't make it stick, then he loses the position. As we see that Lamborghini now under pressure, Buteloup trying to go around the outside. That didn't work. He was close enough to put in a feint move, let's say, but not close enough to make the move stick. But it does feel like that Lamborghini is not particularly fast. He's got a little train now with Buteloup, Pfeffer and Baldwin all trying to get past. And then one of our only real Aston Martins of Williams Esports just behind.
And just while you're saying that one, we've got a 5-second penalty for Tizione Barone in third position. So a 5-second penalty has been applied to our third place driver. That's going to change things significantly at the front of the field. And that's for an instant on lap 1, turn 1, involving cars 71 and 92. 71 being Birione and 92, I'm going to look down my list, being the one Josh Rogers. So 5 seconds applied to his time. Meanwhile, Jeremy Butler in the other VRS Commander car finds a way past the Lamborghini into 7th position, and this is time now for the Frenchman to get the pedal to the metal and gap this chasing Pike. Baldwin as well moves up the running order, so James Baldwin finds a way past Tobias Pfeffer and Sarika in the Aston Martin, and basically the rest of the field join this fight, so very intense in the lower reaches of the top 10 at the moment.
And that's the issue. If you get offline for one corner, as we saw Tobias Pfeffer being done by James Baldwin, 3-4 corners later, he continues to lose more and more positions. Here comes Arthur Camara to go and try and go around the outside. That's not going to work, but perhaps he's got the better braking zone into the first turn. Where is Camara's teammate? Nick, we have lost the lead BMW, I think. Can't see him in the top 23 of Naujoks.
That's an interesting point. Naujoks, of course, was mired down in the lower reaches of the top 20, but 16th on the grid, I believe. He's 36th in the running order as he goes now for a very late braking manoeuvre on Martin Stefanko of the Williams Esports Aston Martin ahead. Naujoks 6th in the running order as he goes now for a very late braking manoeuvre on Martin Stefanko of the Williams Esports Aston Martin ahead. Naujoks looks to make way past on acceleration out of the corner from the Aston Martin, but Nils Naujoks, this is a nightmare for the current third place man in the championship. Had an incident on the opening lap, got caught up in some of the drama, which is the danger, isn't it, Ben, when you're starting that far down the running order? Not necessarily it's your own mistake, but it's getting caught up in somebody else's issue, and that's exactly what has happened to Nils Naujoks.
Well, you say the middle of the pack. We also saw Josh Rogers getting caught up seemingly with Brioni on the first corner. Love to see that again, to be honest, because it didn't look to me as like a particularly aggressive move from Brioni. It didn't look as though that was an effect on Rogers' oversteer, but perhaps there was a tap, and that's why Rogers lost that momentum. Ultimately, stewards have said 5-second penalty to Brioni, and that will drop him down not too far, but with the field so compact right now, actually he will lose quite a lot of track position.
And this is for, in terms of the championship, in terms of the viewing at home, absolutely fabulous stuff. Let's have a quick recap of where our top championship runners are, as we're finding now Kevin Siggy under pressure from Baroni behind. Not quite enough room for the Bentley to get his way past into second position, but David Tenitzer, joint championship leader, also leading the race. Kevin Siggy in second place is 7th in the championship, having only had a bit of a disappointing start to the season. Gianni Di Salvo 4th on track, 5th in the championship standing, so good points for him. Fellow joint championship leader Josh Rogers currently running in 5th position, so he's giving away points to his Italian rival. James Baldwin, our driver who's 4th in the overall standings, runs in 9th, so Baldwin very much on the recovery at this moment in time, needs a good score here today in order to keep up his momentum. Eamon Murphy, who's the driver that currently sits 8th in the championship for Yas Heat, isn't even in the top 23. In fact, thinking about it, that's not a name I recognise on the starting lift, is Eamon Murphy, so maybe he's not made it through to this race. As we're having now, I believe, us hearing in my ear, we're going to have a quick look at the start once again in replay to find out a little bit, to unpick what happened at the front of the field. So as you can see, David Tinitza starting second, but well in the lead on the run down to the first corner. Kevin Siggy getting a good run on the Ferrari driver, but not enough space as Tinitza covers at the inside. Keep your eye on now onto the VRS Commander car. There you go. That's the tap on the rear quarter of the Porsche. Sends Josh Rogers sideways, and that is why Baroni has earned himself a 5-second penalty for that bit of contact in the braking zone into T1.
And I think if you look at that, then that makes perfect sense, doesn't it? We didn't quite see that from the angle that we were looking at. But what's curious for me is why Tinitza doesn't get a penalty, because that was a huge kind of jump into the lead ahead of Siggy when Siggy was the leader of the race.
Ooh, a little bit of contact. Sorry to cut you off there, Ben, but a little bit of contact between Rogers and De Salvo. Rogers just tapping the rear of the Ferrari. That's put De Salvo now firmly onto the defensive into T3. Rogers will try and go the long way around the outside. Nick Wisniewski thinks, yes, I'm going to buy into this as well. You boys keep fighting. I'll pick up an easy position. Nicola Wisniewski gets a good run now as we're starting to power up the hill. We're coming into a right-hander. Wisniewski on the inside. Josh Rogers gives him a little bit of a hip and shoulder, but Wisniewski's not going to be put off by that. He's in a Bentley. They're massive. Plenty of strategy there to keep the car on the straight and narrow. Josh Rogers tries to muscle his way through, but loses out and drops down into 6th position. Wisniewski up to 5th, and De Salvo retains 4th. That has not worked for Josh Rogers, and now he's got his teammate, albeit in a different car, shadowing in 7th place, Jeremy Butlew.
That's exactly what you expect, isn't it, from a man of Nikodem Wisniewski's character. He really is an aggressive driver, and that was a great move to go round the outside. Really shouldn't have made it stick, but knew that he was racing Josh Rogers, and Josh Rogers is an incredibly clean driver as well, so Rogers didn't force him off the track, didn't try and create an accident. It eventually gave Wisniewski the inside line for the hairpin, and he got that move done. So Rogers on the back foot because he was trying to attack De Salvo, and that's what I said earlier. When you're in the middle of the pack, when you're a Kevin Siggy or Josh Rogers earlier on, if you fudge your overtaking move, then you will be overtaken.
Yep, great stuff. And we're just hearing now from our race control that David Tinitza's race start was okay. It was that Kevin Siggy was going 10 kilometres per hour slower than the upper cap limit of the speed limit on a start, which is 70 kph. So that has been reviewed and deemed okay by the race steward. So Siggy a little bit slow to the line and has paid the price with track position, but 40 minutes 21 seconds left on the clock and 4 tenths in arrears. There's plenty of time for Kevin Siggy to make up for that mistake, as we're looking now at Josh Rogers currently in 6th position, but wants another go and Nikodem Wisniewski ahead.
At least he knows that Bouteloup behind will not necessarily challenge too much, being teammates, and that whole team is so respectful of Josh Rogers' amazing talents that they kind of see him as the king of the Coanda crop, if you like, and therefore Bouteloup will go past if he needs to. But at the moment, you have to say Josh Rogers looks a bit rustled, and maybe the contact of the first corner did damage that Porsche a little bit, and he hasn't got quite the car underneath him that he would like.
Yeah, this is not the usual everything's cool, calm and collected Josh Rogers performance, as we just saw him monstering the curves there, the back of the Porsche bouncing up and down due to taking a little bit of an aggressive line through the chicane. Luke Whitehead, we're looking at now at the SDL Esports by Logitech G, currently in 15th position in the number 32 Mercedes AMG GT3. Whitehead having a good drive, 15th place. Petrochenko just behind in the beautiful number 26 Porsche. He's followed by Brzezinski in the Williams Esport Aston Martin. So these 3 drivers locked together as one down in 15, 16 and 17th position. But just look a little bit further back and we see a gaggle of cars starting to make their way up into this train. And we've talked about it ad nauseum before in many different championship events, but this is the problem. You start battling hard for position, you're going slower than your natural speed, other cars will start to make their way into that fight as well. So you've got to be careful, you've got to pick and choose your battles, Ben, don't you?
Oh yes, absolutely. I've got a bit of a discussion point for you. Teams such as Williams that are not necessarily associated to a particular brand, like you might find obviously FDA Esports being associated to Ferrari, as Brioni has a little sniff down the inside. Why does Williams choose to really spread their load? If you look at their drivers in this race, we've got a Bentley, we've got an Aston Martin, and we've got two Aston Martins, I think, but we've got different drivers in different cars. When as a team, I would be looking to try and really use one car and make sure the setup is absolutely nailed using the three drivers' experience.
That is a very interesting point, actually, and I've often found that a curious strategy by many teams. VRS Coanda as well, another team, very much one of the biggest teams, running multiple marks in their stable. And I'm much like yourself, but I would prefer, personally, to keep the same car across the board and maximise the talent that you've got on board. But I suppose that's why we talk about it and they go out there and race it. They must have a strategy somewhere.
I wonder whether it is a case that we still don't quite know, you know, with the BOP slightly changing race per race and a bespoke BOP for this championship as well. We don't necessarily know which mark will be the strongest. So if you can put your drivers in different marks and guess which the strongest car will be, with obviously an educated guess, then perhaps that works out well. But actually, for the moment, the top five in the championship are teams that are locked into the car that they have to use, side by side.
Side by side with Luke Whitehead that we saw earlier in the Mercedes AMG, just gets overtaken by Petrochenko. That opens the door for the Williams Esports team that we were speaking about earlier. This is the Aston Martin entry from the squad, dives to the inside, not enough room past the AMG, just about in that corner. Brzezinski decides discretion is the better part of valor, bikes out of that manoeuvre, but that puts him under pressure from Savalainen behind as well. Savalainen in turn has Massoud in the Porsche, giving him close company. So these cars now, we suggested they were going to be close together in the next lap or two. It's actually been a case of corners, not laps, that brings this fight together. And Jakob Brzezinski in the Williams Aston Martin has got to look in his mirror, has got to look through his windshield, has got to avoid driving into the back of that Mercedes in breaking into the chicane, and he is going to be eyes like dustbin lids, checking every corner of the car to make sure nobody's finding their way past. And as a racing driver, although they'll be disappointed they're outside of the points, the fight that they're having will be absolutely exhilarating, won't it, Ben? They'll be having a great time in this race.
Yeah, well, hopefully, you know, that's why we all do the motor racing, whether it be real or virtual. You do it because you want to have a good time and enjoy yourself. And so, yes, they're out the points, but there aren't many points opportunities in these races. We do have a switch of position, I think, at the back of that group.
Yeah, I believe that's the Porsche that found his way past, as we're looking now again at this fight for second position. Remember, folks at home, Birioni, the man that we're looking at, is Arno Birioni in the MCW Racing Team number 71 Bentley. Third on track, very much harrying Kevin Siggy for second position, but he's going to have 5 seconds added to his race time, courtesy of that contact with Josh Rogers in lap 1, T1. So although we're fighting on track for real estate, he's got to be careful, he's got to be mindful that he needs to clear the McLaren, and he needs to buy himself 5 seconds over the course of the next 35 minutes. In other news, the pit window is open, so from now the drivers have 10 minutes to jump down pit road, so keep your eye out for that one as well, because strategy will come into play as Nikitin Wisniewski once again has Josh Rogers all over the back of the Bentley Continental. So Rogers regained a bit of composure, found some lap time in that Porsche, and is now charging forward. He wants that position back, but Nikitin Wisniewski will be very, very reluctant to cede track position at this stage in the race, as we're getting ever closer to the halfway mark in the third round of the GT World Challenge Esports Europe Sprint Series here at the Hungaroring.
Worth noting that Brioni will be taking that penalty when he does his pit stop, so that will clear because he has a pit stop due. If he got that penalty in the second half of the race after his pit stop, it would be then added to his finishing time, but he can take it in the pits, as Wisniewski is the first of our leaders to come in and take his pit stop, and literally it will be a stop, 1 litre of fuel and back out. They shouldn't be taking tyres, but Wisniewski is going to put himself in some serious traffic, I think.
Yeah, this is an interesting strategic call. We often see drivers either jumping in at the very beginning of the pit window or at the very end as James Baldwin now goes for a move. 8th position on track. That's about to become P7 as he goes side by side with the Lamborghini. Baldwin now will be on the outside for the next corner. Can he brave it around the outside? Does he have enough on the brakes to clear the Lamborghini? No, he does not. Drops back down into 8th position. Looks at the back of Dominic Blair's car. Once again, James Baldwin, the number 28 McLaren Shadow driver, hard on the charge. He's had one good opportunity. He's looking to try and maximise it again. Goes wide to come tight to get the run out of the corner. He's back on the outside line again. The Lamborghini will run him out of racetrack. Baldwin there, unflappable behind the wheel. He's been there before. He's seen it all before. Well, that's not stopping the hunger to find his way past this Lamborghini in the pit window to make a little bit of track distance between himself and the chasing pack. And James Baldwin, as always, offering good value for money for us viewers at home as he charges through the field.
Just trying to see where Wisniewski came back out after his pit stop. It was certainly not in the top 23, and I don't have visuals on outside of the top 23 positions, but he lost a lot of position. 26th position overall, so really in traffic. And contact there from Baldwin as he gives Blair the hurry up. He's really doing a really good recovery drive, isn't he, Baldwin? But ultimately, had he been at the front of the field, he could have been fighting for victory.
Yeah, James Baldwin, poor qualification, down in 15th place. Really hard start to the race weekend today, but doing the best he can. And as you say, Wisniewski returns in 26th position. He's that far behind. He could be back at Paul Ricard again, the race that we had on the 11th of June. And this is dangerous for Wisniewski because, as you say, he's now involved in cars that are naturally a little bit slower than he is, as Josh Rogers comes down pit lane. Hello, this is interesting. Josh Rogers, P6, decides to take an early stop in the VRS Coanda Porsche. So let's keep an eye out now where Rogers returns on the circuit in comparison to Wisniewski and in comparison to some of the drivers that will be stopping a little bit later on. So big money move now. Josh Rogers down pit road as one of the BMWs gets well out of the way of the chasing pack. Good driving there, but are you surprised, Ben, to see Rogers coming in so early, which is contrary to the strategy that we've seen the Australian driver use in the past?
Well, it depends on whether they saw an opportunity, they saw a hole, and if their team felt like he was being held up. Wisniewski in 26th position, Josh Rogers just haven't quite gone over the line yet. Is it 20th? No, 21st, waiting for him to actually cross the first beam. I think he might settle there. Actually, is that Wisniewski in front of him? It is. Wisniewski's jumped Rogers.
And this is why we love pit windows. It offers drama and strategy. Wisniewski pulling the trigger early has got the reward. He's ahead of Josh Rogers. They're 20th and 21st. They're the highest runners of the drivers that have stopped out on track. As I've said, look at the timing screen on the left-hand side. If it's green, that means they've been down pit road. If it's orange, they have yet to stop. There are 5 minutes and 22 seconds of the pit window open as Kevin Siggy, once again, under pressure in second position. He's had Bibrioni tailing the McLaren for the duration of the first half of the race. A little bit of traffic getting out of the way nice and early, nice and clean. Good driving there from the lapped car, and this is the extra element of jeopardy now, isn't it, Ben, that traffic is starting to come in play. Cars on different strategies as well. You're getting a little bit of fatigue, your tyres are starting to wear down, the car's getting lighter, the balance is changing, and plenty of racing still to do.
So how did Wisniewski get in front of Rogers? Half a second faster stationary in the pits, and also had clear track on his outlap. Rogers falling right into the wheel tracks of Wisniewski. Certainly does not have clear track now, as we see Luke Whitehead trying to make a move. I think that is it's teammates, isn't it, in two different cars, with Masood trying to get down the inside, and that should work if the Williams gets out of the way in front.
Yeah, say another team running, same team, two different brands under the same umbrella, and those two nice clean exchange of positions there for Luke Whitehead and Masood in the number 33 car. That is one of the Williams Esports that have come out of pit road just a bit further up. That is Brzezinski, I think, as we're looking back again at Kevin Siggy. So this far now, Kevin Siggy, what does he do? Do you hold it all the way to the pit window? He's going past pit entry now, so decided against jumping down pit road. Doesn't want to give clean air to the potentially faster Bentley Continental behind. David Tinitsa at the front of the field, as often we see with the race leader electing to stop as late as possible to see the whole field shake itself out. So Tinitsa, everything's going right so far for the Italian driver, so why change the habit? Keep things going, keep the car in the zone, let these two hold each other up as Baldwin and Arthur Camara jump down pit road now. So we're seeing more and more of the front runners coming down pit lane, and it'll take a good 3 or 4 minutes, Ben, won't it, until everything's evened itself out and we see who's the winners and who's the losers of this pit window period of the race.
We've only got 3 minutes left of the pit window, so there's not too many laps to get it done. Josh Rogers looking like the faster car here, isn't he? Really all over the back end of Nikodem Rizhnevsky coming into the first turn. Rizhnevsky goes to the inside line, but Josh actually doesn't have the legs. So even though he was very, very close and had a slipstream, he did not have the speed to get down the inside into turn one. That may be a setup thing, that may be a bop thing, but certainly it showed very clearly there.
And this is a little bit like the Mercedes Formula One scenario that Josh Rogers finds himself in. He would rightfully have expected to be at the very sharp end of the grid in this Porsche, and I dare say that they've set the car up in such a way that it'll be good over the course of a stint, but maybe don't quite have the straight line speed needed to effect good, clean and straightforward overtakes. Now he's had a little bit of drama, a little bit of contact, a suboptimal pit stop, and is in the pack. It's going to be all the harder for the VRS driver as Wisniewski gets it all sideways into the chicane. Nikodem Wisniewski compromised himself through the middle of the corner. That compromises him on corner 8. He's fortunate that the final section of the lap is a little bit tighter and a little bit more technical, so there's no big braking zones in which to defend against Rogers, but Wisniewski getting it wrong, putting himself under pressure. Rogers will see that. He will acknowledge that the driver ahead is starting to get a little bit scruffy in his placement of the car, and this is an opportunity for Josh Rogers, but without those horses in the Porsche, without that straight line speed advantage, he's going to have to do it in the corner. There's going to be no easy overtake for Josh Rogers, and this is a dangerous time for the joint championship leader. He wants the position, but he cannot afford a DNF at this stage in the race.
And we've got pretty much everybody in front of these guys now in pit lane, so these two will be progressing up through the field. Just how far will they go? Check out who is in front of them as they come into turn one. There's Jeremy Boutaloop on the inside, and Rogers gets ahead of Boutaloop, but they are still behind a Ferrari, so that must be Giovanni De Salvo, I would say, not necessarily our leader.
Yep, and that's a very dangerous time when Boutaloop came out of pit lane. He's see the two cars hounding down. The tyres are a little bit cold because he's been going slowly down pit road, and did very well actually, did Jeremy Boutaloop, not to get involved in these two cars and make contact with his teammate. And we're hearing now that Sarika and Brendan Lee have not been down pit road yet, and with only a few seconds left on the pit window, they're not going to make it in time to serve their mandatory pit stop, which will be a disqualification. So Brendan Lee and Sarika making a fundamental mistake in this race, and that is going to cost them hugely as Brendan Lee embroiled in a fight with another one of the Ferraris. That's Leonardo Dalcamo at this moment in time as pit window closes in 10 seconds. And Ben cannot believe it, with the team screaming no doubt down his ear. That is a fundamental mistake for Brendan Lee.
Two big teams, isn't it? It's not like they're tiny teams. FDA Academy. Brendan lives in Maranello. He is completely and utterly Ferrari now, and he is very much dedicated. I think he even lives with Tonizza. So that is a disaster. Doesn't even go to. No, hang on. We're now looking at De Salvo. I was about to say he didn't even go to pit lane this time. Brendan Lee will try and go to pit lane, but ultimately, as you say, he will be disqualified. And the Williams also from 9th position. So that's a bit of a disaster. But as it is, then Tonizza, Siggy, and De Salvo, the top three. Brioni taking his penalty and dropping to 7th.
So The pit stop window is now over and done with. Everybody, apart from those two, have been down pit lane. There's 24 minutes left on the clock. Who are the winners and who are the losers? Gianni Di Salvo does great work to get himself into the podium places. So Gianni Di Salvo now running in third position. It's a Ferrari 1-3. Kevin Sig in the meat in that Italian sandwich in second position. Nikolai Wisniewski moves up into P4. Josh Rogers, the heavily battered Josh Rogers, holds fifth position ahead of his VRS co-ander teammate Jeremy Boutlou in sixth. Pironi drops down to seventh courtesy of that 5-second penalty, and James Baldwin continues to fight the good fight in eighth position. Sarika is ninth, but we're expecting a penalty to come his way due to not getting down pit road. Currently he's ahead of Dominic Blyer in 10th position, and Tobias Pfeffer will be one of the recipients of Sarika's penalty and will move up into 10th eventually, although he's currently 11th on track. So quite a few big names there, Ben, that have done a lot of good work during that pit sequence. Probably the biggest winner from it all is Giovanni Di Salvo, who we're looking at the moment. He's third position, but he's got 1, 2, 3 cars. Very, very keen to liberate that podium spot from his hands.
So interestingly, those two cars did actually go through pit lane, Sirocco and Brendan Lee, and that would explain the they did what they needed to do. They didn't miss the window, but it doesn't seem like the game registered the pit stop. So that may well mean they didn't actually take any fuel on, or some kind of other thing going on there. So that's something for race control to have a look at. Did they stop enough time to take that fuel, and therefore it's a bug? But that's very unlikely. We haven't really seen that before. And here's a move. Tobias Pfeffer being dive bombed by Arthur Camara, and Camara gets himself up into 11th position with a little bit of rubbing.
Very aggressive move there from Arthur Camara. But actually, speaking of Camara, we've not seen much of him in this race, but that is a great recovery drive from the BMW man. Camara well down the running order in qualification, currently 12th in the championship standings, and very much on the outskirts of scoring a point. So good, solid, robust drive from Arthur Camara, holding the candle for the G2 Esports BMW team thanks to Nil Nauyok's difficulties. But look here, Ben, look at these three now, 3 cars practically as one. Gianni Di Salvo on the defensive, Nikolai Wisniewski in 4th position, trying to attack, trying to defend, and Josh Rogers desperate for any opportunity he can get his hands on in 5th position.
I just don't know where he's going to do it, though. He's definitely faster through the middle section of the lap, but there's just no overtaking opportunities. And it's in the big braking zones here, for instance, where there is the place you can overtake, but the Porsche's not strong enough. It's not close enough when the Bentley gets up to a decent neck of speed. So really curious for Josh to work out a way of doing this cleanly without contact.
And the lucky thing for Josh Rogers, if lucky is the right word to use, that is, as you rightly pointed out earlier, Ben, the teammate of Josh Rogers in 6th position. Jeremy Boutlou will be instructed, I am sure, by his team to not attack the Australian driver at this stage in the race and give Rogers the free air, the comfort, the safety net he needs to deploy all of the tricks he has in his armoury to find a way past this Williams Esports Bentley Continental GT3. But those drivers have got to get a bit of a shift on, because Birione, who's still stinging for his 5-second penalty, is not a million miles away, 2.3 seconds in arrears and closing quickly, and he's got James Baldwin and Renko Sarika for company as well. So these drivers need to sort themselves out pretty quickly, otherwise it's going to become very uncomfortable indeed with the chasing pack behind.
And remember, we offer automatic qualification to the top 5, so this battle is in part for that. At the moment, Boutlou would have to get himself another have to go through the hot lap process, whereas Josh Rogers will automatically qualify. And with a man like Josh Rogers with so many different programs going on, he doesn't necessarily have the time to dedicate to hot lapping, although it does look as though he probably could qualify regardless anyway. But it does mean that Boutlou would have to do it, and anybody behind that, including James Baldwin. And would Baldwin sit through a hot lap competition to get himself into the next round and to keep his championship alive down in 8th position? It depends on his programs.
Well, It never rains, but it pours for Birone. Having had a 5-second penalty, he's now got a drive-through penalty. So 7th position, a drive-through penalty has just popped up on the screen. I can only guess at this juncture, but that is for track limits violations. And Tiziano Birone serves that penalty immediately, jumps down pit road, will make sure he catches the pit lane speeding line, drop the speed limiter on as early as he possibly can while not losing any time, and that is going to take him way outside of the top 10. So Birione having great pace but absolutely no luck in this race, and sadly drive-through penalty taking him out of the points. Meanwhile, the battle for 3rd, 4th, 5th and 6th rages on, with Nikola Wisniewski on the attack and the defence at the same time in the Williams Esports Bentley.
Worth noting also, there's only 0.6 of a second between our top two. There's now a 7.5 second gap to this group. So De Salvo definitely doesn't have the pace of the top two, and you kind of have to say that neither does Nikodem Wisniewski. But our front two are still pretty well locked together.
Yeah, Kevin Siggy, we've seen him on the attack in previous races, then running out of tyres, running out of pace towards the end of the race, but that doesn't seem to be the case at this stage for Kevin Siggy, fighting hard, closing the gap down to David Tanitsa ahead. We're looking at Josh Rogers now, great camera, nestled in the front splitter of the VRS Commander Porsche, looking at the substantial rear of that Bentley ahead. Josh Rogers will be sick and tired of looking at Williams branding on the Bentley Continental GT3. He'll be desperate to find a way past, but as Ben has already mentioned earlier in the show, Rogers, very much a professional driver, will have one eye on the championship as well. And often championships are won not by your ultimate pace, but by your ability to hoover up points when things are going against you. And Josh Rogers, he'll want those extra points, but he'll also be keen to protect himself as we're lapping one of the BMWs now. And Wisniewski, he's the outlier in this, isn't he, Ben? That he's not really got any points on the board, so he's kind of looking for glory and to throw himself into the middle of the championship challenge.
And we've got so many rounds that that's totally possible. If you miss a couple of rounds, the total lack of points available across each particular race allows someone like Wisniewski to have a really decent point score and catapult himself not into championship contention, because our two championship leaders have been so strong so far, Tanitsa and Josh Rogers. Tanitsa's now going to take a healthy championship advantage away from this round, although we're still in early days. But just because Wisniewski wasn't with us for the first 2 rounds does not mean he shouldn't be there. He's not valid to be there, and we are going to see a bit of traffic for Tanitsa and Siggy. The BMWs have been very good at getting out the way, but has everybody? Let's have a look.
Right before that traffic comes into play, ladies and gentlemen at home, turn off any distractions, because I'm going to try and explain to you what's gone wrong with our two drivers that allegedly haven't visited pit road. Right, car number 74, Brendan Lee, the Ferrari, currently sitting in 12th position on the race. He has been down pit road, but it was an in-game bug that incorrectly suggested he had not served his mandatory requirement. So Brendan Lee, 12th place, the penalty that would be applied to him will be removed at the end of the race. Now Sarika, who is car number 69, who is currently 8th on track, has been down pit road, but it was invalid because he did not put in the mandated 1 litre minimum of fuel. So he will receive a post-race time penalty, so he will drop from the points paying positions. And Birione, who's basically the man that's had every single bit of drama in the entire race attached to him, has retired from the event. So Birione decides enough is enough, time to call it quits for the day, as Brendan Lee now is seen dropping heavily down the running order. So we see that off screen, not quite sure what's happened to Brendan Lee, but the good bit of news, the penalty's been removed. It's been countered by going off track and investigating the scenery, one would imagine.
Yeah, I think he's removed himself, hasn't he? Down to 20th position now, but certainly some kind of misdemeanor for the 74. I'm sure our boys will be looking to try and get that replay up at any moment. 15 minutes remaining. This is the time where we see those tyres starting to fall off. This is the time where we see the difference between the guys that looked after the cars and the guys that haven't. And for me, Wisniewski really hasn't. He's been spinning up those rears, especially through that last corner, always getting a bit too much car over the curb and getting the car sideways. And as you know, Paul, well, if you get a little bit too much heat into these tyres, then they really start to react badly, and especially when you wear them down to canvas, as we do at the end of these races.
Yeah, it's a vicious cycle as well, isn't it, Ben? You start sliding a little bit, you get too much heat, you get too much wear. That makes you slide some more, then the wear and the heat become greater. The car becomes more and more difficult to drive. You're concentrating more on keeping on the grey stuff than you are from getting the optimal line, the optimal braking zone, the optimal acceleration, and you start rolling backwards. We've seen it happening at Monza for Kevin Siggy, who put a great defensive race up, and then it all fell apart through no fault of his driving in the last 5 or 6 minutes of this race. So it will be very interesting to see if Nicola Wisniewski's got enough life left in that Williams Bentley Continental GT3 to either attack Giovanni Di Salvo ahead, or more realistically defend from the VRS Coanda pairing that is snapping away at his heels behind. And this is the bit of the race now where I've done SRO things for quite a while, and you think everything's locked down for the last 15 minutes, and then it's all changed. Now let's have a look here. This is Brendan Lee that we're about to see in the Ferrari. Runs a little bit wide, gets another Ferrari into his rear quarter. That spins him around. The difficult, frustrating position of having to wait till the racetrack is cleared to spin it back in the right direction. And Brendan Lee left the door half open, and unfortunately wasn't Ferrari sized, and going the wrong way due to contact is the end result. Shame there for Brendan Lee, who drops down now into 20th place.
Well, Brendan was doing actually a racing line there, going a little bit faster into the turn, going a little bit wide mid-corner, and then cutting back for a fast exit. And you can do that when you've got nobody around you, but when you do that and you've got somebody around behind you, you are inviting them to stick their nose up down the inside at the apex, where you are nice and wide to set up for the exit of the corner. And unfortunately, Brendan then went for the exit, as he would do if there was nobody there, and there was, and that turned them around. Not really either's fault, to be honest, because this circuit, especially these last two corners, it invites you to do those slightly triangulated racing lines.
Yep, just one of those racing incidents that do happen. Generally speaking, the quality of the driver has been very good, very clean so far throughout the course of the entirety of this championship, actually, not just this particular race. And these four drivers continue to fight tooth and nail. And look in the background, there you go, just at the end of the screen is the James Baldwin number 28 McLaren Shadow car, slowly but surely catching up to this pack. Baldwin's going to be stealthily finding his way into this 4-car train, and I do think that he's got a very good opportunity to start making a few places up in the last 11 minutes and 50 seconds as Wisniewski once again under attack, decides against defending the inside line correctly, uses the Bentley Continental and its friendliness over the curbs, goes a little bit wide now. Josh Rogers looks to the inside, can he get the power down in the VRS Porsche enough? No, he cannot. The Bentley on the wide line, the best arc out of the corner, just has enough horsepower in that big Continental to retain the lead of this fight. But Josh Rogers now, signal of intent, this is go time in the last 11 minutes and 20 seconds.
Yeah, I think that Wisniewski's feeling the pressure now. There's so many mistakes creeping into his lines, his braking zones. He was too deep into that hairpin by the water park. There's a water park just on the outside of that hairpin, and just as we were talking about triangulating the corner, it opened the door for Josh to get down the inside. But ultimately, it's a weird corner, that one, because you can pull it around the outside and get out the corner faster than somebody down the inside. And as we saw, the Bentley managed to do it like we've seen many a car in the real world done before.
Yeah, but we've seen already a couple of times, not least of which was with Brendan Lee just a couple of laps ago, that when you do that, you leave yourself vulnerable. A little bit of contact, these cars are on a knife edge of grip, and you leave that door open, you find a nose of one of your rivals up your inside, and it is very, very easy to spin the cars. Now, let's look at the front of the field. We've kind of forgotten about these two as they've checked out from the chasing pack, but Kevin Siggy has found some lap time. Kevin Siggy in the Red Line Racing McLaren 720S is now over the back of long-time race leader even David Tinitzer for the FDA Esports team. So Siggy has not given up hopes of taking a race victory, and this will be a big result no matter what happens for Kevin Siggy, throwing himself into contention, and David Tinitzer needs to be inch perfect for the last 10 minutes. So big pressure on these two race leaders.
Tonitz is a very, very intelligent driver, though, and I wonder whether he's just managing himself, just making sure he doesn't push too hard, take too much out the tyres, just do enough to be there just in front of Kevin Sigge and really not drive at 100%. Sigge definitely didn't have the pace early doors, and he might have a setup that's coming on strong at the end. It's the kind of thing you would expect from a very experienced team like Team Redline, but ultimately they do seem a bit too close for the relative pace that we've seen during the race.
And it is fabulous to see Kevin Sigge at the sharp end once again, adapting to the world of SRO Esports in fantastic style. Don't often see the driver in this particular sim racing platform. So Kevin Sigge doing fantastic work in second position. A drive-through penalty further down the order in P23 for Attila Denks in the number 89 BMW from BS Competizione. So Attila Denks with a drive-through penalty. He'll have to serve that in the course of the next 3 laps. And let's look at Josh Rogers for a moment, starting to fall back now from the bike of Nikitin Wisniewski, and as predicted, there's James Baldwin very much in the fight now. So Jeremy Butloop's got a job to do to keep James Baldwin behind. He does not want his team leader to come under pressure from the McLaren Shadow driver, so Butloop's got to play the defensive game. Josh Rogers has got to dig deep and find some lap time if he wants to challenge the cars ahead. So it's all starting to develop now as the sun is setting on this fantastic race here at the Hungaroring.
It does feel as though actually Rogers has either made a mistake on the last 2 laps, or he's just decided he cannot challenge Wisniewski, because there is now almost a second gap between Rogers and Wisniewski, and Wisniewski really crawling all over the back of De Salvo. De Salvo definitely doesn't have the pace any longer in that Ferrari, 9 seconds off his teammate Tonitz at the head of the field. I wonder whether Wisniewski still fancies himself a podium at the end of this one.
Yeah, the Ferraris in general, both in Tonitz, De Salvo and Brendan Lee's hands, all look to be struggling for a little bit of lap time in the final stages of this race. James Baldwin wipes a bit of sweat from the brow as he keeps a fantastic drive. I'm going to interrupt myself for a second just to praise James Baldwin. Remember, he qualified down the lower reach to the top 20, 15th, if memory serves me correct, had a very clean, very safe opening lap to move himself into the top 10, and he's just slowly and methodically been charging his way through the field. And I dare say if we had another half an hour on the clock to go in this race, he could find a way past the 4 cars ahead of him, but we only have 7 minutes, and Baldwin must fancy his chances of breaking into that top 6, potentially even further up the order given the chance. So great drive from James Baldwin. He needs to clear Jeremy Butloop immediately if he wants the chance of Josh Rogers, as one of the back markers goes way off the racetrack to let the leading cars through. And this is going to be all the way down the checkered flag, this one, Ben, isn't it?
Yeah, that is the Williams Audi getting out of the way, and going very, very wide at the first turn, but only actually ending up letting 2 people through. Surprised he didn't work harder there, because he could have helped his teammate Wisniewski get past De Salvo. Ultimately, he was very, very, very kind. No real featuring the Audi at all in this particular. Well, look, top 23, no Audis whatsoever. The BOP not favouring them on this particular circuit.
Oh, Ben Constant-Juris, you tactician, you, thinking if that was your team, you'd get the back marker to play a part.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you've got to play these games though when the competition is so close. We had 1.9 seconds covering the top 43 drivers in qualification. There's no such thing as a slow driver in the SRO esport world of esport competitions. So you've got to play every single card that you're handed. If that means bringing a little bit of team strategy in, just like VRS Coanda are doing, they've no doubt deployed team orders for Jeremy Butloop to protect the rear of their championship leader Josh Rogers, who is started to close back in again on Nikitin Wisniewski's Gianni De Salvo makes a bit of a break in 3rd position. So you've got to play these games as Tommy Osgaard now gets himself a penalty for avoidable contact, car 48 and 9, 48 being Romenko and number 9 being the Giuseppe Guiatara Lamborghini Jean Alesi Esports as well, getting into stride for the closing stages.
Yeah, I'm afraid I didn't even realise Østgaard was part of our race today, down in the outside the top 20 positions, but he's there with his Aston Martin. Again, another brand that you want to do so much better than it seems to do on many of these races, unless we do end up with adverse conditions. It's a bit of a struggle, the Aston Martin. Here is Baldwin all over the back of Bootloop. Bootloop hasn't actually had to defend particularly hard so far. Baldwin just not quite close enough, and this is a very Hungary type race, isn't it? They are very close, but there's just no opportunity to actually get an overlap and get a pass in.
James Baldwin now just showing his nose against the back of the Bentley. Jeremy Bootloop, if he's playing the team game, he'll start to ease off the throttle slightly, just slow the lap times down, so if he does get overtaken, the gap will be too large between James Baldwin and his teammate ahead, Luca D'Alcamo. Now drive-through penalty in P16, no doubt that is for a track limit penalty infringement from Leonardo D'Alcamo in 17th place, but Lou started to come under pressure, as you say, not having to defend just yet, and Josh Rogers will be so grateful to have his teammate protected behind him. Otherwise, I dare say he would be under a lot more pressure to try and retain that 5th position at the moment. Meanwhile, Kevin Sigge 0.4 of a second away from David Tinitsa at the front of the field as we timely go to our race leaders, and Tinitsa doing everything he needs to do at this moment, keeping it cool, calm and collected, but Kevin Sigge still fancies his chances, I feel.
And we've only got 3 minutes and 20 seconds remaining to make this move happen. So only a couple of laps, only a couple of opportunities into turn 1. That's where Siggy really needs to think about setting himself up. The Ferrari looks good in the middle part of the lap, doesn't it? But that gap does fluctuate between about 6/10 and about 3/10. And really, as I say, the only opportunities to get this move done is either a massive mistake from Tinitsa or into the braking zone. And actually, Kevin Siggy there at the chicane going a little bit deep into the first part, which compromised the second part, and he's still got work to do.
And now James Baldwin really on the charge. You saw Butterloo having to do a little bit of defensive covering the inside line. That has compromised him on corner exit, and James Baldwin really wants this position. He's currently 4th in the championship standings. This is a disappointing end result, despite it being a great recovery drive from Baldwin to hold 7th position at this moment in time. He's got a good gap to the chasing pack behind as well. So James Baldwin on the attack in the final couple of laps of the race. Does he have what it takes to get up McLaren's shadow? 720S up into 6th position, trailing the bike of the Bentley Continental, coming down into the final corner now, onto the start-finish straight. Baldwin as close as he can get, a little bit mid-corner delay as he checks up on the bike of Frenchman Jeremy Butterloo. Not good enough in terms of horsepower for the drag down into T1, and Butterloo, I think, should be safe into the first corner braking zone.
Yeah, he does really have the legs in that Bentley. It does seem to have a really good top-line speed, as we saw from the Wisniewski Bentley as well. It just, against the Porsche, there was no competition. And again, this time, Wisniewski on the back of the Ferrari and not having to worry about Josh Rogers. So it is really seesawing for that Williams Bentley with only a minute and a half remaining. And it's still so close at the front of the field. It's still so close for 3rd. But ultimately, we haven't actually seen that many passing moves.
Yeah, as you say, it's a typical Hungaroring race, but fantastic performance from all our drivers at the absolute limit of what these cars are capable of. 60 minutes of racing were separated by absolutely nothing throughout the entirety of the top 7. Beautiful driving. Jeremy Butterloo, the meat in the sandwich at the moment, closing on the bike of his teammate, but not quite close enough to make a move. Josh Rogers will be safe from attack, I think. You see James Baldwin in the McLaren shadow, the blue car at the back of your shot, looking left, looking right, trying to find a way past that Bentley as the clock winds down now. 40 seconds left on the clock. James Baldwin, if he's going to do it, he needs to pull the trigger now. And will the driver take a risk, or will he bank those points? We'll find out in a few moments' time. But Baldwin, for my money, looks to be on his toes.
I know, but it's just no chances, are there, Paul? I love the fact you're building this up, but it's just so difficult to find a way through. And actually, Tinitsa on this last lap has a decent breathing space over Kevin Siggy. No chance to see a move going into turn 1 between those two. What about this battle further back? It's so close, isn't it? You hope, but can it happen? I don't think so.
No, even if there's no overtake, this has been fabulous racing from these drivers. The only hope really for Baldwin, apart from a close your eyes and throw it down the inside, is to harry, to pressure a mistake from Jeremy Bouteloup ahead. Jeremy, a very fast driver. We've seen him in many different competitions over the years. He's been there, he's done that, he's won the T-shirt as well. So mistakes are few and far between. He knows he doesn't need the speed, he just needs the car placement, he just needs to play the protective game from James Baldwin behind, as Baldwin now drops a few car lengths back. A little bit of a mistake in the second corner, drops the McLaren Shadow driver a little bit too far away from the rear of this battle, but it's been fantastic as we expected at the start of the show, Bennett. It's not quite over yet.
No, it's not. You're being such an optimist, Paul. Third position, I have to say, doesn't necessarily deserve to go to Giovanni Di Salvo. He, in terms of outright pace, he hasn't had that throughout the second half of this race, but he has done a great job of keeping that Ferrari ahead. And for me, Tanitsa has done a measured drive here. He did not decide to disappear into the distance. He just kept Kevin Ziggy sniffing around his exhaust, but ultimately keeping that advantage.
So David Tanitsa rounds the final corner from second on the grid to the race lead, never headed. Apart from the pit sequence, David Tanitsa crosses the line to take the checkered flag for the Ferrari Driver Academy Esports team in the GT World Challenge Esports Europe Sprint Series. Kevin Siggy second, Gianni Di Salvo leads home a train of cars in third, Nikodem Wisniewski P4 in fifth, Josh Rogers sixth position, Jeremy Bouteloup, James Baldwin in seventh. We're looking now at eighth position for Williams Esports. Moreno Sarica in ninth position is Dominic Blyer in 10th place. Arta Camara 13th, Masood in 14th, and 15th place goes to Ezeka. There are a few penalty points and timing penalties we need to work out as the race progresses. Luca Lozio spins the car right at the very final corner. Tommy Usgaard in 24th position for VRS Coanda. There needs to be a dissection of what happened there for the Aston Martin driver come the checkered flag. But Ben Constanduras, we suggested this is a difficult track to overtake on, but regardless of that, the racing once again was absolutely superb.
Oh, it's just so professional. They're just such great drivers, such great teams. As we've mentioned so many times before, drivers from across the spectrum of esports coming to join us here on SRO Esports. And it's really nice to have the creme de la creme. Ultimately, it does mean that very little errors are created, and therefore we don't tend to see on a track like this too much overtaking. By the way, just a note, Eunice Salvanen there running out of fuel in the Mercedes on the last lap. And of course, Sirocco finishing in 7th position, but have a massive penalty for not taking his pit stop, so he will drop down the order as well.
Yep, fabulous stuff from all concerned, and excitingly, with David Tanitsa taking the 25 points home and Josh Rogers coming into 5th position, we need to see the VRS Coanda SimSport team regroup, assess what went wrong, and come out fighting at the Brands Hatch Grand Prix circuit, which is the next race of the Sprint Series for the GT World Challenge Europe Series on the 9th of July. Of course, tomorrow we're in action again for the Americas Championships, so do stay tuned for that one. The American Series also proving to be an incredibly competitive championship. And Ben, let's take a moment and catch our breath, because that was, from beginning to end, full of fights, and to see the car separated by absolutely nothing after an hour of racing, it's just so impressive, isn't it?
Yeah, there is the first corner accident for Josh Rogers that set the tone for him finishing in 5th position. Just that little swapper, thanks to Brioni getting down into his gearbox, and Brioni then going wide at the 3rd turn, and that allowed Di Salvo at least to get alongside. Once Brioni was removed and given a 5-second penalty, then Di Salvo was able to concrete his 3rd position, but it was very, very close.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. And we are now joined once again, this is becoming a reoccurring theme, the winner of the 3rd race of the season at Hungaroring, FDA eSport driver David Tanitsa. Congratulations.
Ciao Paul, ciao everyone. This one was really tough as always, and I was really lucky at the start, because I don't know why Kevin backed off a little bit, so I was able to overtake him into turn 1. and then after that, it was just about pace and keeping the focus, because Kevin was insanely fast, especially in the first sector. He was gaining by quite a lot of time. So during the end, I was really focusing on the last sector, because it was where he could overtake just the first sector in the first main straight. So yeah, really happy for the team, and also for my teammate Giovanni, who ended up in third place.
Yep, great result, David, for the FDA Esports team. And towards the end of the race, it seemed like Kevin Siggy was closing into your car and really reduced the gap. Is that just a case of you managing the gap, or were you under threat at any stage?
No. At the end of the stint, it was just him being really fast. And I think also in the first part of the race, he could have been really close, but he had the Bentley behind him of Tiziano Brioni, so that's why he has lost a little bit of time. So the pace at the end was his real pace.
And we saw, I say, some great pace from the entirety, all three of the FDA Esport team drivers. And next up, we go to Brands Hatch Grand Prix circuit, a very different track. How are you feeling about the next race? Do you think you've got a car that can be competitive and keep you at the front of the field?
Yeah, surely the Ferrari 488 is should be really fast around there. But personally, I've never raced in Brands Hatch, and I don't really like also the layout. So we will have some training, and then we'll see. But the chances to win will be, I think, really high. Also next time.
Fantastic stuff. A final question from me, just to give our viewers a little bit of insight as to what goes on behind the scenes. Did you have a team manager or an engineer talking to you throughout the course of the race and telling you the gaps between yourself and your rivals and where you can be faster and make up time?
Yes, of course. In our team, as in every single race, our team is composed by Amos, which is, let's say, the analyst. He helps Stefano, which is our main coach. So during the race, we keep in contact with those two really nice guys, and they tell us everything: lap times, the pace of the car in front. Also during the race, I asked them what was the top speed of the McLaren, because I wanted to know at the end of the stint how much it was faster in the straight to then protect into turn one. So the help of these guys in this kind of races is really crucial, in my opinion.
Fantastic insight and a true team effort. David Tanitsa, race winner of the third round of the GT World Challenge Esports Europe Sprint Series. Congratulations once again.
Thank you, Paul. Ciao, guys.
Fantastic stuff. Ciao, David. And Ben, that just goes to show you, I think you spoke about it during the live comms, the level of professionalism to have that amount of coaching, that amount of data being fed to the drivers while they're racing at speed. It's just incredible, isn't it?
Well, you would expect that from a team called FDA, Ferrari Driver Academy. That is a works Ferrari team. That is money from Ferrari, from Maranello, to fund their esports projects. And so that's exactly the kind of that's money well spent to make sure they win all the races that they can. Although now Tonitza is no longer my favourite man because he doesn't like Brands Hatch, and I don't know what person in the world of motorsport would not like Brands Hatch.
A little bit of home favouritism there.
Sorry, David. Sorry.
Yeah, fabulous stuff and great insight from David Tanitsa and a great performance from the team. And as we say, Brands Hatch is the next race of the Sprint Series on July the 9th at the same place, the GT World Challenge YouTube channel. So GT World YouTube channel. So do tune in for that one and the many SRO eSport competitions that we have running. And Ben, once again, sir, it's a pleasure to be alongside you, and thank you for joining me today on what has been a fascinating race.
Thank you, Paul. Sorry for the slightly sleepy Kenyan voice for this weekend, but next time I think I'm with you in the UK. So every time I commentate with you, it's a different country this year.
It does seem to be, yes indeed. So do enjoy the rest of your time over in Kenya, and everybody at home, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to the broadcast team, the organisers, the drivers themselves, the stewards that do great work back at house. And until next time, from Ben Constanduros and myself, Paul Jeffrey, thanks for tuning in. See you later. Bye-bye.